I've been testing Star Citizen's next major patch, and it has some big features like new hauling missions and persistent hangars that can function like a home base, complete with fish tanks for decoration. But it's also becoming a controversial update due to the amount of busy work it's adding on top of Star Citizen's already laborious experience. Let's talk about what's new and if it's truly a fork in the road moment for what kind of game Star Citizen is going to become. Okay, so the first thing I noticed, and you'll notice when spawning into 3.24, is that there's no longer a city or station inventory that you can just grab items from by hitting the I key. Hitting I will still bring up your personal inventory, but nothing else. Instead, you'll have to go to these inventory terminals that are located, well, kind of all over the place at the moment. They're even located in your hab room when you wake up, which is convenient. From here, you'll need to find the items that you want, and then drag them from your main inventory UI over into your drawer UI, and once delivered to the drawer, you can then place them on your person. Now, we've known for a while that station inventory was just going to be a placeholder for a different system, but this new system is a bit cumbersome. The extra step of moving items to a drawer and then to your person is just weird, and it feels like some sort of tech limitation that CIG hasn't been able to solve. It ends up being a little bit more than twice as much work as it was before to equip yourself with gear that you want, especially since a lot of the equipping phase might be a little bit trial and error with seeing what fits and what doesn't. There's going to be a lot of back and forth with the drawer and with your inventory. It's just kind of a pain in the butt. Generally, I don't mind. In fact, I like the terminal interaction, but it's comically laborious having to have the drawer in addition to it. I can only imagine somebody starting Star Citizen for the first time and getting stuck at just how to equip gear and get it from your inventory, and once understanding it going, why is this like this? Having played tons of MMOs, action RPGs, survival shooters, all that have inventory systems that you need to interact with conveniently, quickly, but potentially even realistically, none of them are quite as obscure as this one. It feels like CIG is once again trying to reinvent the wheel with something as simple as inventory management. Eventually, they'll probably come back around to the realization that the wheel was actually pretty good in the first place. And hopefully this is a quick realization and not, 5 to 10 years down the road. Now let's move on to persistent hangars, where you can have a hangar that remembers all the stuff you place in and around it, and it leaves it there, potentially forever until you clean it up. And I should really call it Persistent Hangars Tier 0, which means it's the most basic implementation and functionality of this feature. Now, these hangars are actually pretty cool. Naturally, I brought up some of the first ever rewards that I got in the game, which I haven't seen since I think the original hangar modules from 10-ish years ago. But I finally got my fish tanks back with, no fish in them. I think CIG may need to do some flare overhauls at some point since these items are very old. It is neat being able to set up a little area that I guess would be my hangout spot, but until they get some weapon and armor racks in the game, the functionality of these areas feel kind of cosmetic at this point, but I can absolutely see them being pretty useful down the road. Now, a nice quality of life feature is being able to spawn your ship from within the hangar. The entire floor opens up and your ship emerges on an elevator with flashing lights and blaring alarm systems. And this does look extremely cool, and I thoroughly enjoyed it the first 2 to 3 times that I saw it. However, by the 4th time, I was already thinking, I wonder if there's an upgrade I can make to, speed up this whole ridiculous process. Also, if you call up the wrong ship by accident, which I absolutely did, enjoy your 2-minute round trip of waiting for the elevator to come up and then going back on the terminal and telling it to take the ship back and then bringing the other ship up. It gets pretty crazy pretty quickly. And also, due to the terminal UI not being my favorite, it's pretty easy to call up the wrong ship by accident. Now, if you have a large ship, you will get a large hangar to fit that ship. whether or not you want to call up specifically a large ship. And the large hangars look very cool. The size is impressive, except when you realize that you have to run like half a mile to get to the cargo elevator. The larger hangar layout really doesn't make a ton of sense when it comes to convenience. We're going to need some gray cat vehicles just to drive around them, which might actually be the point. In fact, in the very first hangar modules, that's when they added the original little gray cart buggy to get around it quicker because they were so massive. However, the size really just feels like more of a flex at the expense of actual convenience, and I think that's going to get old real quick. In fact, unless you're operating a large ship, I think you would prefer a smaller hangar just so you can get around it quicker. Also, spawning a small ship on the world's biggest elevator is pretty funny, and then you have to run like half a mile to get to it. Now, speaking of elevators, the new cargo elevator is how you get your big stuff in-game, from the inventory anyway. You use the terminal to access your inventory, move it onto the elevator, and then call it up. Then you see your items there on the elevator and you can move it around and do stuff with it. Cargo containers are supposed to make this process easier, but to get a cargo container to put your stuff into, you have to buy them on a space station, and the persistent hangars are on the planet right now, which is just a ridiculous oversight. CIG needs to let us buy these containers in the persistent hangars or just give them to us for free. There's already way too much running around in this game just to move one item from one place to another, and this is not helping. Also, the current limitation of only being able to buy an 8 SCU size container limits what you can fit inside the container and how many containers you're going to need to fill with stuff to move your things from one planet or station to another. Speaking as somebody who's played a lot of EVE back in the day, moving all of your items from one station to another to essentially relocate your home base was a common occurrence and something you needed to do a lot, and it looks like Star Citizen could make it even more challenging than it was in EVE. And the downside to this is that it makes players want to sort of restrict their movement more, explore less, and just sort of hunker down in specific locations, which I think would be kind of detrimental considering the amount of artwork and explorative nature of Star Citizen. The gameplay is going to disincentivize players from wanting to partake in all of that. Now, bigger game concepts aside, one of the cooler things about these elevators is that they tie into the new hauling missions. There's an entirely new mission tree specifically for hauling, and it is actual gameplay. Finally, this is like the most mission system gameplay we've gotten in like, I don't know, a year of updates. It's been a while. I ran a few of these missions and I can say it's absolutely a good starting point for hauling, but it still leaves a lot to be desired and makes me question some of the current design choices. The way it works is you would accept a cargo hauling contract like you would with any other mission, preferably one that starts at your location or at least somewhere nearby. Then you go to the cargo elevator of this location, you call up the cargo that you need to haul, you move it into your ship manually with a tractor beam, then you fly your ship where it needs to be delivered, park it, and then move the containers onto the cargo elevator at that destination, and then lower the elevator and transfer the cargo into storage to complete the contract. It's pretty straightforward, point A to point B with loading and unloading. Though as you gain reputation, you'll gain increased payouts and the cargo hauling sizes required for the missions, where you'll also need a bigger ship to move that cargo. And a lot of the missions take you to new locations like distribution centers and updated outposts on planets, which is a really nice way to get you around the solar system and see new locations. It's actually a perfectly designed system to get you to just see the beauty of Star Citizen from a less aggressive fighty standpoint. And while again I think this is a good starting point for hauling, it's hard to ignore the fact that it's anything more than just a glorified courier mission at the moment. The list of quality of life upgrades and added features could be pretty long, at least my list would be. Firstly, the mission selection UI does not make it easy to see missions that begin at your current location or how far away the missions need you to go. There's a huge amount of filters and improvements needed for the mission sorting system to just make it easier to go from point A to point B and then from point B to point C quickly without having to do all this comparison research. The next quality of life update would be in the loading unloading process. I picked a ship that had a built-in tractor beam because I really like the idea of being able to unload entirely from the cockpit without having to leave the seat of my ship. Unfortunately, we're not even close to that being a gameplay loop yet. Firstly, the tractor beams on ships do work, but they're very awkward at the moment. Pulling and pushing and scrolling and overshooting your target, the latency with aiming is really just not fun to use. It's much easier to just get out of your ship on foot with a tractor beam combined with your WASD movement controls. It's just more enjoyable to do it that way. Secondly, even if you do load everything onto the delivery platform from your spaceship, well, you still have to manually go over to the platform and then lower it and then transfer the cargo on the UI to finish the mission. It'd be really nice if they could automate this process and have the platform just detect when you have the correct cargo loaded and then just complete the mission from that point. In fact, always having to unload makes it feel less like a trucking job and more of a couch delivery type job. You have to drive to the location and deliver stuff up a flight of stairs, where I'd much rather focus on the driving part. And with the contract jobs, at least for the time being, you have to manually unload everything. There's no convenient drop your trailer here and move on to the next mission type gameplay. It's tractor beam out about 60 to 20 boxes, load them somewhere, and then move on. Some people are going to love this, some people are going to hate it. I'm a little bit in the middle, but it's not quite the trucking dream I had imagined for Star Citizen. Now, sadly, the missions themselves are pretty devoid of, well, anything interesting. There's no NPCs to receive the cargo at the destination, nobody to direct you where to put stuff or make idle chit chat about what this cargo is being used for. This type of set dressing NPC stuff could really be used to make the world feel alive, and at the moment it's just stark and empty. The descriptions of the missions are really basic. There's no voiceover lines for anything in them or NPC interactions at all for that matter. And as far as I can tell, the hauling missions don't evolve into more dangerous or interesting missions. I was hoping for something that would let you choose between a really basic, low-cost, low-risk mission and one that says, hey, we need this cargo, but you gotta fly through an asteroid field and there's pirates, so now you gotta dodge and worry about combat at the same time. Something to increase the price and the interesting aspect of that mission. But at the moment, it just seems super, super basic. Again, a good starting point, but like the rest of CIG's Tier 0 rollouts for their features, they can feel quite whelming. Now, something I haven't played around with yet is that cargo grids on spaceships will lock items into place now. So seats, vehicles, any items you could find, could be a fish tank actually. I'm sure some funny gameplay will come from this, especially with the ships that have exterior cargo grids. People could be sitting in seats on the outside of a ship flying around, which I'm sure will happen soon. Anyway, patch 3.24 is going to be a weird update. If you like hauling, and I do like hauling, there's actually now gameplay and a progression tree, and things get more expensive and bigger, and that's cool. The persistent hangars are neat at best, more silly than functional at the moment. And item management is about to get a lot more cumbersome than it already is. I fear, especially with the basic stuff like inventory, the learning curve for new players is just going to get more unpleasant than I'm sure it already is. And it'll also serve to bog down veteran players who feel like they're just being held back by unnecessary time sinks in between the actual gameplay. Granted, this is a controversial topic, and I know some people are for it and against it. I'd actually be curious to hear what your thoughts are on this whole sim everything approach to Star Citizen. Have they gone too far with some of this UI stuff and inventory management, or do you think it'll add additional value and meaning to the world when it takes a lot of time to do anything? Let me know in the comments. And up next, check out this game that takes advantage of a HOSAS dual joystick system that is also a fantastic space sim that I've been playing a lot while I wait for, well, Star Citizen to do interesting stuff. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.